Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first order of business is to talk streets, WAMPO, and KDOT projects. And I believe that Garver has a full team of folks here to help us with this, and Mr. Lasher is going to start out the discussion. So,
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So what we're going to cover, we've got 4 topics we're going to cover tonight on this specific item. We're going to talk about the WAMPO process. We're going to explain terminologies that you've heard. We're going to discuss the roles of the parties. And then after we get done with this, then Garver's here. They're going to give you an update specifically on Woodlawn. Woodlawn is the first WAMPO project in Bel Aire. Why do we use WAMPO? WAMPO, because we are in a metropolitan area, the feds give funding for major street projects to these types of organizations. So up in Kansas City, there's MARC, Mid-America Research Council or something like that. Anyway, they get it for all of the Northeast area. WAMPO gets it for Sedgwick County. And then once you get outside of the metros, then they get those funds themselves. So we have to use WAMPO to get federal funding. And WAMPO will give up to an 80% funding. So we pay 20, they pay 80. And that's the match that's required. We have not used WAMPO before. And why? The reason is we never had funds to match it. You may remember years and years ago, we came through some very difficult times financially, and we didn't have a lot of money in our reserves or had money to even bond out projects and pay for them. So that's why we've never used WAMPO. So with that, we're going to, Ann's here to talk about the WAMPO project. She actually serves on a committee there. And I apologize. We probably should have done this before we even started the Woodlawn project because it would have been helpful for all of us to understand how this process works and how contracts works and who does what and things like that. But we thought with all the questions that you're getting and citizens' questions and concerns that better late than never. So we're going to talk about how WAMPO projects work. So Ann, you're going to lead us off.
So in order to get a project into the funding pipeline, there's 3 different steps that we have to go through. The first step is getting a project into the Metropolitan Transportation Program, or the MTP. This is WAMPO's kind of long-range planning document, their working document. It covers a planning cycle of about 20 years. But realistically, these plans are redone every 5 years. So it's not super long range, but it does give you kind of that selection time period. In order to get a project into that MTP, you have to go through an application process. The selection committee, which, as Mr. Lasher mentioned, I do serve on, reviews all of the projects that have been submitted, and we have a funding cap that all the projects that we select have to be within that funding cap. So it has to be physically constrained. So that's one part. Bel Aire strategy for this last round was to throw as many projects at the wall and see what stuck. So I would rather do that than have just one project and it not be submitted, it not be selected for whatever reason. So we were fortunate. We did get, the Woodlawn was already in the queue, but we did get the 45th Street project in, as well as the Oliver intersection. I did break those out just to give us a better chance of getting something into the plan. Once the plan is selected, it does go through the various WAMPO bodies. The Technical Advisory Committee reviews it, hopefully recommends it, and then it goes to the Transportation Policy Body, which the mayor sits on, and they have the final approval of that plan. So that's kind of the WAMPO's huge kind of funding document. And then every 2 years, they have the Transportation Improvement Program. That program is what actually selects the projects that are going to receive federal funding. WAMPO has a pot of like 4 or 5 different programs which they receive federal funds for. Not all projects qualify for each different pot of money, so they have to kind of massage the different projects that are selected to go into that. So for that selection, you do have to go through the same process. You submit an application, the project selection committee meets. They have, it's about $12 million, kind of give or take, that they have to play with every year. So they select money or select projects that will fit that. So that's kind of where we come in. We did submit the Oliver project in there. Unfortunately, there was other higher priority projects that got funded. We did get included in the TIP as a non-funded project. So we're in there as kind of the first runner-up, so to speak. So if funding becomes available, they will contact us and say, hey, Bel Aire, we have this amount of funding available. Do you want to take it or not? And if we say no, then it goes on to the next project. One of the things that we have talked about as far as funding goes and is called advanced construction, whereas Bel Aire would pay for 100% of the costs of the project up front, and then KDOT would pay us back. The problem with that in this cycle is we're not guaranteed, we're only would be guaranteed whatever funding is available right now. We would not be guaranteed funding in the future unless we get on the TIP for full funding in future years. But by doing the advanced construction, it costs the city a little bit more as far as interest and bonds, but it does allow WAMPO the flexibility to spread the project out in multiple years. Bel Aire would get paid back over the different years that it is programmed into the TIP. So once you get a project into the TIP, then that's when the agreement with KDOT and the contract, or KDOT and the city, comes up. We've been through that process with Woodlawn. We'll hopefully go through it again with 45th Street, assuming we get approved for funding and get moved on down the road. But that funding, that agreement with KDOT is what sets everything in motion as far as the KDOT funding cycle goes. And with that, I will introduce Chris Bohm, who will introduce, oh, you have a question.
Quick question. Yeah, you said they, WAMPO only got together over 2 years. What years did they do that? Is it like the even years, odd years?
Next year.
When could we expect
Next.
the next one? What part of the year?
The next project is, they're already doing planning for it, and you'll start having opportunities to submit things, I think in the spring, when they're going to start having that opportunity for new MTPs, and it will go out to 2050 is what the plan is. I just came from that WAMPO meeting this afternoon, so it's fresh on my mind about what it is.
And as far as the TIP goes, it currently goes out to, I believe, the year 2025.
Right.
So then the next TIP would be 25, 26 or 26, 27.
Yeah, I was just concerned that we might have just missed one and have to wait a whole 2 years before we could.
That was last year, so they will be working on a new one.
Yeah, they're working on, they're already starting planning for it. So
Yep.
Opportunities will be opened up, I think, sometime in the spring to start
Okay.
making
Good.
applications for things. Okay.
Thanks, Ann. I'm Chris Bohm from Garver. We've been around a little bit, so it's good to see everybody again. I'm happy to be here. And with me tonight is Dakota Zimmerman, and you all know Dakota. He's been assisting. He started the construction operations on the Woodlawn project. He was formerly the Wichita lead, then the Kansas lead for construction, and now is Garver's Texas lead for construction. So we're happy for him, but we're happy he's back to help us out today. And also joining us is Sue Eisman. She's here tonight. Sue is with Garver, has been for a couple of years now. She served a 37-year career with KDOT as a design engineer, a project engineer, a construction and materials engineer, and became the assistant bureau chief of construction for KDOT. And in that role, she oversaw all of the contracted projects for KDOT, negotiated with the Kansas Contractors Association for different industry elements that in dealing with KDOT, and then handled any kind of conflict resolution for many of the projects in the whole KDOT system. So she brings a wealth of information here tonight as well. Also joining us, Shannon Megara, who's our regional construction manager for Garver over this multi-state region. We're happy he came up today. And then Richard Milner, who's been out on the Woodlawn project and working that from day to day, and he sees the progress on that. With that, we're going to talk about a few things tonight. First, just the general contract and bidding terms, a little just informative discussion about KDOT contracts and what they consist of. The typical contracts for KDOT through the local project authority, LPA. So Sue's going to talk a little bit about that and how that all shakes out. And then the roles of everybody involved. So KDOT, WAMPO, Bel Aire, your consultant, your inspecting consultant. And then the different phases of construction, the pre-letting, pre-construction, the construction, and the post-construction. So what are the expectations of all the parties as you move through that whole process? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sue and let her begin her discussion. Thanks, Sue.
I'm going to cover the general terms, and if you have any questions at any time, stop me. Just ask them out there. A notice to proceed. That's when the contractor is allowed to go to work. KDOT issues that, and then they can start their work once that's received. Engineering services, that's your design contract. You know, it's a contract between the designer and the city. Typically, it's the city, and there's no contract between the contractor. It's just with the city. Your inspection services, I mean, on Woodlawn, that would be Garver. You know, there'll be many more projects, but that's a contract typically that the city also does, and they have no contract with the contractor either. Then the next two items, you know, you have substantial completion and you have final completion. Those are terms that are used a lot. KDOT actually doesn't use them. I mean, they go with other things. They consider substantial complete when the project is open to unrestricted traffic. So they decided a long time ago that there's two things that are important: get the project open so everybody can use it, and the other thing is to get it finished. And so that's your final completion, would be when everything's done and the project's accepted. Claims. Claims is what happens if you can't resolve items with a contractor. You know, the contractor wants $10,000, everybody thinks it's worth $5,000, and he continues to push it, or they continue to push it. Then you get into a claim process. So it's when you can't settle with them is when you get into claims. Scope of work, every project's different. You know, you can have a $300 million project, you can have a $10 million project, you can have a $100,000 project. So the scope of work defines what work is going to be done on that specific project. Bid items and units of measure. KDOT lets their contracts with bid items, and then they tell the contractor how they're going to measure it. So, I mean, typical contract can have 50 bid items, can have 200 bid items. It just depends on how broad your scope is and how many bid items there are out there. Pay estimates, it's just the mechanism to get the contractor paid. They do their work, and so therefore they get pay estimates to get paid for it. Submittals, there is a lot of submittals that go back and forth between the contractor, between the inspection team, and between KDOT. The contractor submits a lot of submittals. They'll submit submittals on shop drawings for lighting, what material they want to use. And so there's just a lot of back and forth with what submittals come in. Requests for information, RFIs. Those usually happen when the contractor doesn't feel the contractor defined something well enough. So they have a question, you know, what are you really wanting us to do? Or how are you really wanting this built and stuff? And so that gets sent in, and then it gets, you know, everybody looks at it and they get an answer back on what that is. Change orders. Change orders are the legal way to make a change to the contract. You know, you want additional pipe laid. You want pipe laid in an area that didn't have pipe before. And if a time extension is granted, those all have to be put on a change order for it to be officially part of the contract. So that is that mechanism. Controlling item work. You're going to hear a lot more about that coming up here. But controlling item work is defined by the contractor. It's the item that they have to finish before they can move to the next item. Another term is called critical path. You know, how is it critical to build the project? So that ends up being your controlling item of work, and the contractor defines what that is. Okay, the typical contracts for KDOT are measured quantities. I mean, the inspectors out there will measure the quantities. It can be linear feet for items like pipe, silt fence, striping. It can be square yards, cubic yards, or square feet. And in those items like sidewalk and pavement, they're measured, and then you have to calculate that. And those comps have to be turned into KDOT. And so that's how they're paid. So every bid item will tell them what the unit is ahead of time, and they can plan on what they're going to do with that unit. Okay, then it's all the parties. Who's all involved in this contract or a contract with KDOT? Part of the parties that are involved is your construction team, your inspection team that's doing it. And their responsibilities are to inspect, the contractor's activities and the items they're installing. They're responsible to verify that they're using proper materials that conform with the contract documents and the specifications. They're responsible to track the working days based on the controlling item of work. They're responsible to provide the pay measurements so that KDOT can do the pay estimate. And they're responsible to hold meetings, with the city, with the contractor, with KDOT to try to keep everybody informed. City of Bel Aire. You're an owner. You partnered with KDOT for this project. You're responsible to review change orders with KDOT. You're responsible to concur, if you agree with them when they're finally done with those change orders. So you're involved in that process. Like I said, it's changing the contract. So you guys are involved in that change to the contract. You participate in claim resolution if you get a claim. Not every project gets one, but you are involved in the claim resolution. And the city has the final say on the claims. If the contractor doesn't like it, once the city's made a ruling, their choice is to file a lawsuit after that point. You're responsible to collaborate with the contractor, with KDOT, and the inspection team on the project. Everybody needs to collaborate with everybody else to try to make everything go as smooth as possible. KDOT. KDOT's the authority figure on these projects, but they've partnered with the city of Bel Aire to do this job. They serve as your liaison to the city. They do administer the contract. It is their contract. They process the pay estimates. The inspection team enters all the data, but KDOT actually processes pay estimates to get the contractor paid. They review and determine if a change order is reasonable. If the request from the contractor, if that's a reasonable price, reasonable time. So they look at it from that way. They ensure the consulting firm that's doing the inspection is doing their job. They want to make sure, that they're measuring the stuff they're supposed to, that they're making the contractor, comply with all the contract documents. And then they're also responsible for the contractor to make sure he is doing everything within the compliance of the contract and specs.
When you say process pay estimates, does that mean you actually give money to the contractor? Or does it just say that you've completed the work and we'll give you money later?
No, they actually go in and enter the pay estimate, and then it does have to go through KDOT fiscal to actually get paid. But no, they do the approval to get the estimate paid, paying the contractor.
Okay, so
KDOT tries to pay the contractor every 2 weeks.
okay, that was going to be my
Yep.
follow-up. Thank you.
Yep.
So on your last bullet point, you said that assure the contractor is installing the work within compliance of the plans and specifications. Does KDOT actually come out and do inspections?
They will come out and do more spot checking. They'll come out and make sure, hey, are you doing this here? And just making sure that the contractor is doing things with the inspection team. They'll normally have an inspection team member go with them, and they'll go over spot things just to make sure everybody's doing their job the right way. Okay, the prime contractor. The contractor is responsible to build the project. He's responsible to build what he bid. He's responsible to build the project schedule based on the available working days he was given. And he also must clearly define the controlling item of work. So what's critical to get done first before you can go to step 2, step 3, step 4. And he manages his subcontractors. Chris mentioned before, there's different phases of construction. There's the pre-letting, there's the letting itself. There's pre-construction after the contractor's selected. There's the actual construction, and then there's post-construction. So there are different phases. Pre-letting. PS&E is when plans, specs, and estimates are put together. The designer does this. The designer finishes their design plans and they're submitted to KDOT for review and processing. That's when people say we're at the PS&E stage, that's what it means. The plans are to KDOT for review and processing, starting building the contracts. They determine the quantities. KDOT, then from there we'll get the quantities. They'll do a plan review to make sure it's in conformance with how KDOT normally lets projects. They also review it to see if this project needs a specific special provision that's not in the contract. If you're doing something very special, they'll have to do an additional special provision. And normally the designer helps with that because, they added the special item. Along with that, as they're going through and reviewing all these things, they also estimate how long they believe this project's going to take to do. And they do that based on historical production rates. And they can change, from a rural project where you can have big equipment that moves dirt a lot faster than a city project. They'll have different production rates for the type of contract it is. A city, the more phases you have, you're going to have slower production rates is what in those type of projects. So they take that all into consideration and come up with what they believe is the estimated time to build this project. Then we have contract durations. There's different ways for the contract to be let. You can have a calendar completion date, which means that, Christmas by 2014 or 2013, the project has to be totally done. You don't put any other restrictions other than you give them the drop dead date that it has to be done. You can have consecutive calendar days. I've never seen a project let with just that one, but it's been an element and other things. But what that means is, KDOT typically will let a lot of their projects with ramps. The ramp can be closed 30 consecutive calendar days. And so that would be the days that are on the calendar. Even though they can't work Sundays, it still counts as one of those days. Working days, that's the Woodland project, and we're going to go into that in a little more detail here in the future. But you can do a combination of these. You can do a working day project and have a consecutive calendar days on a ramp. Or you guys probably more, in an intersection, an intersection that's critical. You can have a different time frame for that element of work. You want to be careful with that because you don't want to put it on everything. You want to put it on what's really important. So at that point, you need to determine what's the most important thing for you when you do that. But they can do it. If no one asks KDOT for anything different, they default to working days. So if the designer, the city, or someone doesn't speak up, you're going to end up with working days. So that does have to be discussed. Then you get into the letting phase. The plans and proposals are out there about a month before a contractor bids. Only pre-qualified contractors can submit bids. on the contract, and that's based on the scope of the work, if they can be pre-qualified in that work or not. And then once KDOT receives that bid, they do go through an evaluation process. There's several things that the contract requires them to meet. And so they have to go through that process to make sure that how the contractor bid meets the requirements. So that does take a while. And then once that's done, let's say 3 contractors bid, they all manage to meet that they're in line with the contract compliance, then it is given to the lowest bid. The lowest bidder is selected. And then once they're selected, I mean, there's a lot of paperwork that's got to go back and forth. The contract's got to get sent to the contractor. They have to get a surety to get bonds. And so it usually takes 30 to 60 days to get all that ironed out. Okay, now you're on to the next point. The contractor has a contract. So now he's going to start ordering his materials. He's going to start planning his equipment and manpower. And when he orders material, they'll usually try to get, when can we get this material? Get a time frame, because that's going to impact a lot of things. And so they'll kind of have that idea, and they'll know what manpower they have, what scheduling they have. They'll talk to their subs, know when they're available to do the work. And then they'll create an initial baseline schedule. Once they have all that information, they'll create that schedule, and it will be sent, and KDOT reviews it just to make sure it's reasonable. So it does get reviewed. It can be sent back if it was what people don't think is reasonable, and they have to revise it. After that, a pre-construction conference is held. KDOT is always at them. And then, the city generally has a representative. The contractors there, the prime contractor normally answers a lot of questions. The subcontractors, a lot of them will show up. The more people that really are playing a game in this project, the more that show up, the better it is, because you get a better understanding of what they feel their responsibilities are. And then if there's a public meeting needed, that's at the leisure of the city. If the city wants to have a public meeting held, then they'll hold a public meeting to make sure the public's informed of what's going to happen. And then KDOT does issue the notice to proceed. When they've done everything they're supposed to ahead of time, then KDOT will issue the notice to proceed for them to go to work. Okay, and this is simplified, very much so. You get into the construction phase. 2 of the first elements that happen in the construction phase is, you install traffic control and you install your erosion control devices. You have a stormwater permit, and the contractor has to meet that permit to do the project. So those are normally the first 2 elements that happen on a project. And a lot of times those are done by subcontractors also. And then the contractor does mobilize to the job, and he begins working on the controlling item of work. Working days. When is a working day charged? And this is by the contract. This is by the KDOT specifications. Working days are considered Monday through Friday. So KDOT expects, if the contractor knows that they don't work Monday through Friday, they're going to still be considered if a working day is charged or not. If weather's good and it's all suitable, they would be charged. Saturdays are optional to the contractor. The contractor does get to choose if he wants to work a Saturday or not. Sundays and holidays are not allowed by the contract. The contractor can't work those. So that's the possibilities of when working days can be charged. What constitutes a working day? If the site can be worked on over 50% of the time on the controlling item of work, a working day gets charged. It doesn't matter if the contractor is working on that controlling item of work. It's if they could have worked on that controlling item of work, then they would get charged a working day.
Can you clarify something for us, please?
Sure.
I believe it was last year, we learned that the time between Christmas and New Year's was not worked, that's typical with, we don't
That-
consider those holidays, but maybe
Yeah,
KDOT does.
yeah, KDOT does. KDOT has what they call a winter shutdown period,
Mhm.
and they don't charge time. It's up to the contractor to determine if they're gonna work or not. And the reason they went to that is there's a lot of contractors that just totally shut down from Christmas to New Year's. I mean, that's kind of their break they give their employees is during that time. But yeah, there is that winter shutdown period that no time gets charged.
I just wanted to make sure that.
Yep,
we
that is
understood
true.
If those are holidays or what those are considered, so. okay,
They're
thank you.
they're called a winter shutdown period
shutdown.
in the contract.
Again, that's only for a working day contract. If you had a calendar day contract or a in-day contract.
Yeah, those would, I mean, those really would not apply because you don't charge it on a specific day. So yeah.
So what constitutes a valid working day? Temperature, rain, snow? How do you know that it's not a working day?
Okay, well, I'm going to give you examples later, but I mean, it's like, let's say it all depends upon the controlling item. So let's say the controlling item of work for this contractor is to prepare or place the base material. You know, I mean, so what controls a working day? It rained 5 inches. You know, they're not going to be able to get out there so that you don't charge a working day. If it doesn't rain and it's okay that they could do that work, regardless if they do it or not, you would charge a working day. So it really doesn't matter if they're doing work or not. What matters is can they do work or not?
Yeah, that's my question.
Yes.
Is what defines can they work?
Well, if the site is acceptable to do that work over 50% of the day, you would charge time.
That's still a very vague term. If it's 20 degrees out, is it still acceptable to work if it's dry? If it's
Well,
10 degrees,
it depends,
0.
and it really depends upon what work you're doing. 20 degrees, I mean, they'd have to have, if they were doing concrete in 20 degrees, they'd have to have a cold weather plan. They'd have to make sure that the subgrade's not frozen. I mean, so they can do some things to continue work in some adverse weather, but they don't have to.
Okay, well, that's I'm really concerned about that because the next 2 weeks, we're going to have really cold weather and we're hoping to get the Woodlawn 45th intersection open. And in my estimate, given everything we know about holidays and the weather, it's done for the year right now. I don't see how they can do more than another day's worth of work on it.
I mean, when it gets really cold like that, it does adversely impact the project. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, we got a lot of unhappy campers right now. I think that just heard that.
One quick question on the Saturdays. You said Saturdays are optional to the contractor. If a contractor chooses to work a Saturday, is that a working day at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Another thing I was going to point out is some City of Wichita contracts that we do that follow KDOT spec also stipulate that it's a 6 working, like you can stipulate that it's not just a 5 working day week in your contract. But again, it goes back to what KDOT's standard policy is versus what you might have input on.
Right. If you don't do that, then this would be the standard.
Right. And then to answer the question about like when you can work, a lot of it goes back to the KDOT spec. The KDOT spec tells you at what temperature you can place certain materials. The inspector is going to help, decide, is it safe to get quality with this product, with this condition? And again, it goes back to what the controlling item of work is. So if it's asphalt, it's got to be like 40 degrees and rising or something, depending on the type of asphalt. I mean, there's all these stipulations. So she can't just give you a direct answer because there's a lot of answers just depending on exactly what item they're working on.
Okay, well, specifics about Woodlawn is where I'm at, but I know that's kind of different than what you're trying to present, but
And later on here, I mean, Dakota is going to go through the Woodlawn schedule and
we'll beat
everything.
up on Dakota then.
Okay.
Be prepared. You
Okay.
already heard the question.
And along with working days, I mean, the contract gives the contractor cleanup days. Working days are when the project's supposed to be open to unrestricted traffic. And then cleanup days are other items they can complete after the project's open. And the cleanup days they get are based on how many working days are on the contract. And if working days are added, you can switch from one category of cleanup days to another. So let's say your project was let with 200 working days, you would have got 30 cleanup days, and something happened along the project and you granted 20 more working days and now they're at 220, they would get 40 cleanup days. And the cleanup, I mean, is items that don't affect traffic, seeding, mulching, just, getting your dirt up against your sidewalks before you can seed and mulch. But they can't interfere with traffic during that period of time. Okay, going through a couple working day scenarios. Weather is not preventing the contractor to work, but there's no one on the job. They are going to get charged a working day, whether they're working or not. Another scenario can happen. It rained on Monday. The contractor can't work on his controlling item of work because it's raining. So they would not get charged a working day. And depending upon what your controlling item is, in the spring and fall, it takes a lot longer to dry out if you're on dirt. So there could be recovery days until it does dry out. And they would not get charged time for those recovery days either. They may be out there, if it rained a bunch, trying to make sure they're pumping out any low spots, trying to correct some drainage and working. They're still not going to get charged a working day. Because that's not controlling. They're just trying to make it dry out quicker. So there can be activity out there and still, they can't work on the controlling item. And so no working day would be charged.
And what if there's an alternate item they can work on that's not affected by that rain?
If it's not controlling, they do not get charged, even though they're working on the alternate item.
Okay, so I don't know, example, they were putting in sidewalks as part of the project, but they couldn't work on the road bed.
And if the road bed is controlling, they could put in sidewalks and they would not get charged time.
Okay.
But there's other things other than weather that can impact charging time. I mean, there can be utility delays. You hit a utility and it controls the controlling item. You're not going to charge time until they can go back to work on that controlling item. If there's national material shortages, the specs address that we won't charge time, if they're waiting for certain materials. They told you before how long I worked for KDOT, and I've never come across a national material, but this is a different day and age. I mean, there's a lot of projects going around right now and everything. So do you have any other questions for me before I turn this over to Dakota? Okay.
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question.
Sure.
Back many slides on the city's role to concur with with KDOT. KDOT owns the contract. Forgot where it was. It says review change orders. KDOT owns the contract. Bel Aire concurs. What if they don't concur?
Well, I mean, it's more or less the final approval that you agree with it. That you agree with the change that KDOT has on that change order.
KDOT owns the contract, so it's
They do.
really,
But I mean, KDOT owns the contract, but they really kind of own it jointly with the city. They're administering the contract. You still have a lot of say in the contract. I mean, like I said, in claims, you have the final say. If the city doesn't go for it, it doesn't happen.
So the only change order I know of on this project so far has been a request for additional rebar because they underestimated rebar in the bidding process, or I guess it's probably in the engineering phase. And so we were asked to approve that. It was, I think, $20,000-$30,000, and we approved that additional rebar. The city did.
And,
there's one other, I thought there was other,
There's another one
Larger
that's pending on the amount of concrete because they missed the amount of concrete required for the fire department. But they wanted to wait on that to make sure that there were other issues with the concrete. Maybe they're going to end up with more concrete or less concrete. They didn't have the final number. So they wanted to wait to propose that one. But I did ask the engineering firm to go back and look at
Right?
the
Remember
bid
that.
tabs, make sure they didn't overlook anything else, and they did discover that.
Yeah, KDOT doesn't want to surprise the city, that they signed change orders for a bunch more money and you had no idea it was going on.
I think the big one we had a lot of discussion on was when I think a water line
That's it.
hit. And we ended up replacing the water line as part of the project, but we hadn't really planned to do it.
Oh, yeah, we did have that early on.
That was what I was thinking.
I don't know that we were actually in the KDOT contract phase at that time. I think we were still doing the utility work. Can't remember for sure.
Sanitary sewer line by the box, it was on the KDOT.
It was on KDOT contract. Okay. All right. I remember that. I forgot about it. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that some of the challenges that we're talking about, the rebar quantity, the measurement of paving, the utilities, those are pretty common things that occur on a lot of projects, whether they're KDOT projects, whether they're City of Wichita projects. Those are pretty common things that occur. So while you don't like them to happen, they just do. That's a reality of the business of doing construction and working underground. So
I've never seen a contract go through without change orders. I mean, it's just, like you said, it's construction. You're dealing with what you find out there, and sometimes you have to make changes to the plans.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love the questions. Please continue that. That was our goal, is that we get through this and it's really educational and beneficial to everyone. So I'll repeat what Sue said. Feel free to cut me off anytime and take care of that. So I'm gonna carry it through the construction phase into post-construction. And I think we're gonna have Ty close us off on this workshop, and then we'll get in the Woodlawn update where I'll answer Councilmember Welch's question there. But carrying on here on the construction phase. Oh, let me go ahead and go to the next slide here first. There we go. So we put this in for the work of the contractor, and it's kind of more of a general sense of how the contractor operates on each day by day on site. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. It's probably a user error, to be honest with you. So work of the contractor. So during these projects, the contractor controls all the means and methods. And to kind of define that a little bit more is the contractor, like Sue was saying, dictates the controlling arm of work, but they also dictate how they're going to go about doing so and what equipment they're going to use and how it's going to get installed. Of course, the specifications has guidelines of you have to meet this criterion, et cetera. But as long as how they're proposing to do the work falls within the boundaries of the contract, the plans, and the specifications, KDOT, the city, and the inspection firm, whoever it is, really can't tell them what to do, nor do we want to tell them what to do, because then we assume liability and risk for that scenario. So as long as they're within the boundaries of the guidelines and the documents on the job, they need to press on and carry on and do so. So that's really the biggest thing to take out of this is as long as it's within that progress there, everything's okay. And I'll wait for my pointer here. Sorry. Oh, good. Oh, man.
There you go.
Look at that. We're good to go. All right. Continuing on construction phase. And this is another. Point that way. Can I just use the keyboard?
Yes, you can.
Perfect. I'll do that. I can figure that one out.
So Dakota, it's not like there's a warranty on the work as long as it's done within the specs, right?
Yes, on KDOT projects, there is no warranty similar, Bel Aire, your own projects, there is a 2-year warranty with those. KDOT projects, there is not. But the specifications are very, very prescriptive. So, there is certain works, you have to use this kind of equipment. The material testing on to make sure that's in the guidelines and just the placement in general. Then also the post placement, was it the temperatures, was the conditions right? It's very prescriptive. So as long as they're staying within those boundaries, how they go about it and when they go about it is really up to them. But there is a lot of checks and balances that verifies this is quality material going on the ground that the city's paying for, but also the federal funds are paying for as well. That's the biggest thing. And so
Dakota, just to clarify something.
Mhm.
If we find that you set one of the inlets wrong, the contractor set the inlet wrong, but we find out after the project's complete, we have no recourse on that?
That's a good question. I truly hope that we'd find that before we got to that point, but we'll play in that scenario. Say they put an inlet in 10 feet down more downstream than it should have been,
Yeah.
10 feet away from where the plan said it would have been. You know, I sued, I had to do that, but I mean, that if we're within the timeframes, we'll take care of it. But outside of that, you can't, because there's no warranty. Once the project's, yeah, once that final acceptance happened, it's a clean cut at that point. Unlike what you're probably used to on the city projects we work with, it's a 2-year warranty. So we would schedule an 18-month calendar appointment with Ann, just go out on the site and do another check. Is anything messing up or anything popping out here? With KDOT projects, that's not in the contract. Okay. So if the city, and keep in mind, I just went too far. If the city wants progress expedited, and keep in mind, we're talking in general sense here, not Woodlawn specifically, but just general projects, because it sounds like WAMPO is going to be an avenue the city uses in the future. Once progress expedited, that's usually done prior to letting, and the avenue we use that is milestones. So I think Ann talked about it last week about 45th Street. If you want this intersection done at a specific time or calendar days tied to that time, you can set that as a secondary milestone in relation to the overall working days on the project. You can sub that out as a portion. And the reason they want that prior to letting is that the contractors are going in bidding, knowing that is their criteria. Everyone's playing the same, it's an even playing field with everyone's coming into that. And so that's usually the avenue to go about that. And we want to let you know that for future projects, that if there's some other things, whether it's counter pollution date or counter days or a combination of both, you have that flexibility to use those tools moving on projects.
Dakota, you might expand upon that a little bit, expand upon how that could impact overall cost and also
That's a good question.
number of bidders.
Yes. Yeah.
Expand that a little bit for everybody.
So let's just do the 45th and Oliver project, for example. Ann brought up a good one. That Maze project is another good example. We'll go 45th and Oliver. So say we got 45th and we put 300 working days on 45th and that whole project overall. But we want the intersection done in the first 6 months, for example. You can set that criteria, but you just got to be reasonable with the time you're doing that criteria. And that KDOT reviews this as well. KDOT, won't say, hey, we want it done in 2 weeks and it's a whole intersection. They won't let you do that. I mean, they might, but your prices are just shooting through the roof at that time. So if you want the intersection done in the first 6 months, which is a reasonable request, you can put that on there, but then the contractor's going to look at that. Do I have the staff? Do I have the manpower to do that? Because you might start pushing out other contractors that may not be able to meet that demand. And 6 months is plenty of time. And I'm just using hypothetical examples here. But anytime you crunch something down, risk and price starts going up. And so you got to balance that out. And KDOT will help you out a lot with that, with their production rates and their gut feel of their experience and whatnot. And your design engineer can help you out too as well. But that's usually that correlation you need to observe when you're evaluating doing instances like that. It's just, are we being reasonable with this request? And how's it going to impact the prices or the contractors that bid the work? So that's a good question. I think I got that. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that in the slides on the letting process.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pre-construction phase talks about building the schedule. So you don't have a schedule before you let the bid, typically.
So the schedule will come in after the contractor's selected, but before the notice to proceed gets issued.
Okay.
But what we're talking about, these milestones, would be in the letting.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be an abnormal type of contract. That'd be.
Yes. It's not normal to, we were talking about this actually from our experience with other jobs. It's not normal to add in criteria after the contractor's selected.
But even before, even during the letting phase, it's not normal to set the schedule.
No, it's not
Yeah,
normal.
that's what's.
So I'll kind of clarify. Contractually, you're not setting it. You're bidding the days or whatever milestones.
Yes.
Contractor is preparing to build the project in those days. So they're putting together some sort of estimate when they're pricing it, going,
When they're pricing.
can we even do this?
Yep.
And in some cases, contractors may put LDs in their contract, which you might expand upon that too. And that kind of gets back to the cost impact of how much the city is paying for it.
Correct.
And whatnot.
Correct.
So,
Yep. We got a slide just on a scenario like that.
I was going to hit on the Oliver intersection again, since we brought that up.
Mhm.
Instead of saying it has to be done in the first 6 months of the project, would it be better to give them time frame to get it done, like 45 days or something? Whenever they wanted to start on it, would that work?
That would work.
More-
And that'd be great because that gives them more flexibility of plugging it into their schedule on how they're approaching the work. So you could say 300 working days overall, but we're giving you 45 calendar days just for the intersection. And they'll say, all right, I'm making this up, of course, day 180, when they get close to that, we're going to start that. And so everyone says, all right, your clock's starting 45 calendar days at that time. And so you go through and that's a criteria. Now there is verbiage. I always want to be fully transparent. Say 1 month you had 18 inches of rain when the 5-year average is like 5 inches of rain. That's where you'll work with the contractor and that's in the specifications of saying that's abnormal for their expectations, because whenever you do counter day jobs, contractors put in their expected weather days.
I think most people understand if you flood the intersection, you can't work
If
on
you
it.
flood the right. I always want to clarify, want to make sure I touch all bases, but yes, yeah, you're exactly right. That's a really good way to do it because you're giving the contractor flexibility to plug it in, because they may have other projects where their crews they want to put on that is doing other stuff, but they could plug it in a different spot. So anytime you provide more flexibility to the contractor, you're helping out the price correlation issue.
Dakota, on the flip side, you might say, give an example of why you might be really prescriptive with when, say, a turn lane or an intersection needs to start or stop. I know the example you're giving is probably related to a school
Yes.
opening. So that might be something that we're having to worry about in the near future with
Yes.
45th. So that's another example. Kind of explain why you might want to be very specific.
Yeah, and that Ann mentioned the Maze project last week. So that's similar to Arturo Street, and I think there's two or three schools on that street. And they say we got to be done at this time, and they put a hard stop on that time so that it doesn't impact the schools that it could potentially do that. And so those are the different things you need to think about. What is really going to impact systems? Yes, construction is a headache in general. It really is. But if there's something that's abnormal that the school bus has got to add 30 more minutes to their drive time to get through this and stuff like that, you got to evaluate that and it can set that criteria.
Do we know, since you brought that up, if Sunrise has a period where they don't need access from 45th Street?
I'm not sure, but what I can tell you is the individual I've been communicating with this whole project is really on top of it. I bet we'd probably talk every 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I haven't specifically asked them, is there a period where you don't need any access
Well, they have access from the north.
coming in?
Yeah, but if it's a regular school period, I know they want all the people going through there. So that's why I was asking from 45th Street access.
Yeah. That'd be a good question to ask them.
Yeah, so on some of the just to speak to that, on some of the contracts we've seen, in fact, one recently in Andover, we had to have, obviously we didn't have the whole project done by school, but basically the project let in the spring. We started in earnest, worked through the summer to finish a specific part of the paving, just so that Andover High School would have access. And we did finish on time. And that's a really tough thing to overcome. Sometimes those timelines are really crunched, but there was an importance in that specific contract. And so we knew we had to focus on that.
And the other thing to mention is having that clarity in the contract going into it. Everyone's on the same page and knows this needs to be done. Here we're at. Yep. No, great questions.
Well, I just knew if they could rip out both driveways at once, they could get across there faster.
It speeds up stuff. Yes, it does. Yes. Hopefully I didn't mess it up again. So the next slide is promoting progress. And this is a scenario where you have a city, the KDOT, or the inspection firm themselves are seeing that progress isn't where we like it to be, or it's slacking off a little bit. Lack of better words, I apologize for that. But the biggest thing, what it comes down to is communication, flat out communication. That's the number one fault in construction. And anyone, whether you're doing buildings, highways, streets, that they'll say the first thing is just, oh, we just had lack of communication there. It drives everyone insane. So that's the biggest thing is collaborate. And it's not just in progress meetings. It's if we see someone on site, call everyone up, we'll drive out there and look at it and check it out. But collaborate about alternate avenues. If you have an issue, if you're working this phase and there's an issue that's shutting you down, don't just drop everything and leave the site, because no one wants that to happen. So get together, collaborate on what we can do. Maybe we can move into another phase and start that, or a portion thereof, or something along those lines, but just be consistently proactive in collaborating with the contractor, KDOT, the city, everyone involved would really help out with that, promoting progress. Because then the contractor knows, hey, we all have the same goal. We want the job done. We want it done as quickly as possible, also as safely as possible, with the highest standard of quality in mind, of course. And so if you can able to collaborate together and execute that, it goes a long ways. And so that leads to the next one: communication. Relay concerns from the city and the citizens. If they're impacting a driveway or a business, let the contractor know that. Usually, they're talking to the people inside, of course. But then that's another instance we can get together. Hey, can we put temporary rock here for a week while we're waiting on this? Can we do something to maintain that access and keep it moving along? And then, of course, the last one is per the specification in KDOT, anytime the project is 2 weeks behind, so either 10 working days or 14 calendar days, that is a trigger point for KDOT to request an updated schedule. And so the reason we do that is that way we can see the next. Anytime you're 2 weeks behind, it's gonna change your controlling item of work. It's going to change your critical path. And so we want to see that updated schedule. One, what's the steps to correct us? And two, how that impact us long term. What are we looking at? And so those are usually the tools we call them to promote progress on the site, and how we utilize that, or how an inspection firm can utilize that, and the KDOT can utilize that, and the city themselves can use it to keep it moving forward. And then going back again, since we're getting towards the end of the construction phase in this presentation, touch on substantial and final completion. Sue discussed it a little bit. It's not terminology KDOT really uses, but it is a common best practice terminology in the industry. A lot of people are familiar with it. But Sue hit it right on the head. That when it comes to these type of projects, really your substantial is you're not impeding traffic in any way. You're not having a water truck driving down one lane that's backing up traffic. You are. It's there as its intended use for the public to be driving through. And so working days are continuously charged, regardless if they're over working days or under working days. You keep charging all the way through it, even to final completion. So to get to final completion, this is when everything is done. And so to get to that, we actually have an on-site walkthrough called the final walkthrough. KDOT's there, the city's there, the inspection firm's there, the contractor's there, all in person. You start on one end of the project and you walk clear to the other end of the project. You're looking at everything. You're looking at seeding. You're looking at the trees they plant, the sidewalk they put in, if the curb and gutter gets a crack in it, the striping's pulling up. I mean, you're absolutely covering the whole site. And so at the end of that walkthrough, you generate a punch list. And that punch list gets issued to the contractor. And then they work on that. When they're done, they'll request a verification, and we'll go out there and check them off as they're going. And once that punch list is done, KDOT, with the city's concurrence, obviously, because they're a part of this the whole time, accepts the project. And that is when the project is done. And I am beating up stuff now. When the project is complete. So going to post-construction, as we mentioned, the inspection firm is tracking these working days through there the whole time. And really, it doesn't matter if they're over days or under days, they are charging the days when it's appropriate. Then let's play the scenario, they are over the working days that were allotted to them. KDOT has liquidated damages defined as type A and type B. Excuse me. So type A is the project is not open to unrestricted traffic by the time allotted. So any days after the allotted amount, they're getting type A damages. Type B is the project is open to unrestricted traffic. However, they did not finish their cleanup items that are not impacting the traffic within the cleanup times allotted to them. There is not a scenario to where you would charge type A and type B on one single day. It's one or the other. And so that's something that's also defined on that. So going further in liquidated damages, this chart on the right is directly out of the KDOT specifications. It's standard across the board. All KDOT contracts abide by this. And so if you look at it real quick, the side on the left is your original contract amount. So that is when the contractor was selected. If there are change orders that increase or decrease the contract amount by the end of it, that does not impact this chart. It is right when the contract is accepted, and those stay standard. So if you find where you're at with the project you're on, and then you move over to the right, you got your type A column. That is all your type A damages per day. And likewise on type B damages, there's your dollar figures. And so the assessment of these is handled by KDOT and the city. The inspection firm tallies and tracks the working days, and then that goes to KDOT, and then they start looking at the books. What are they working on? Is it type B, type A? And of course, the inspection firm plays into that as well. But that all comes from our diaries as we're doing it every single day as an inspection firm. Whether they're on site or not, we always have to do a diary. So the damages are assessed. If damages are assessed, it's not as if the contractor cuts a check back to KDOT or the city. What it does is that value on the final pay app comes off the top overall contract amount. So basically, it's reducing the price of the project, whatever that value is. And so that's how it's dispersed there. These figures in this chart, they're reevaluated every 2 years. The KDOT has to work with FHWA, the Federal Highway, to get these approved. Of course, they send all the data in to justify what these are, and it's an average across the entire state. You know, we got rural areas, we got high traffic areas, we got cities, so they kind of blend that all together and produce this chart. And then always, LDs should not be considered as a penalty. It's more a avenue for the owner to recoup additional cost incurred by the project going further than what it was. And typically that's inspection, because they're still working. The inspection firm has to be out there verifying what they're doing. And so that avenue is there to recoup cost.
So that's interesting because the city pays for the inspection, and it's the city and KDOT and the WAMPO that pays for the construction costs. And so what you're saying is the city, if we go past the date, will continue to pay for additional inspection costs, but only recover about 20% of the damages assigned because they'll come off of the contract value, which is paid by WAMPO. Is that right?
So we knew you were going to ask that question, or one of you are going to ask that question. And this is the fully transparent. So the inspection firm, we are not privy to those conversations because we provide the data. What we would recommend if that scenario does happen in this city is you get with KDOT, and once those determinations are made of what damages are what, and to talk with them about how that split is or what that split looks like, because I really don't know. I know Sue talked about a lot of her experiences from KDOT. There's traditional stuff, but every project's different. Every single project's different. And I know this one was, if we're going to talk about Woodlawn, is very different on how that evolved. So our recommendation, if that scenario pops up, get with KDOT, and they'll walk you through that.
So how often do you actually see liquidated damages like this on the projects? I mean, just broad brush.
As far as the days charged, it happens. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's unusual to have LDs on a project. From our perspective, the inspection firm perspective is, I would say there's been 40% of the projects I've been on that we have tracked LDs on there. Okay. And then that goes to KDOT, and KDOT does what they do with their relationship with the contractor and whatnot. So it does happen. Yeah.
Just to say, that's much higher than I would have said for what I've experienced in my career.
Mm-hmm.
We really, as a contractor, do not want to have LDs because that's something that you put on your record.
Right, yeah.
Like a lot of owners ask, have you had a project where you had a claim or liquidated damages, or there's a laundry list of things that you have to answer when you're qualifying to do work for KDOT or for any owner. Yeah. You don't want to put that on there. So no contractor is going to go into a job wanting to have LDs. But I will say, sometimes there are contracts that you bid that there's probably a likelihood, and sometimes that gets, unfortunately, gets missed in the process. So.
In overall KDOT, since I was the one that, when I worked for KDOT, we would final the projects out. I'd say about 20% of the contracts ended with LDs.
What you see is 20? Okay.
Yep.
Around that.
Well,
That's not a hard number.
No, it's broad brush. I get it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And she saw it from a way different angle than I ever will see it from being on that side of the fence, of course. But yeah.
Have you ever seen a scenario where the contractor couldn't finish the contract?
Like completely?
Like he went bankrupt for some other reason, or
I'm sure she has. I haven't.
So what happens then?
And the contract's set up to handle that. I mean, they have to get a
Hey, Sue,
surety.
can you come up here?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're all right.
Yeah,
wanna make
it's
sure
better
everybody-
on the mic because this is broadcast.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that can happen. It has happened. It rarely happens. But I mean, the contract set up, they have to get a bid bond for performance and payment. And so then that bond person's responsible to get another contractor in to finish the job.
Okay.
So there is provisions, like I said, that rarely happens, but it has happened in the past. Unfortunately, if it does happen, it tends to delay the project some. Because, you know, you get with that surety, they're not going to turn around the next day and have someone to show up at the job. I mean, they need to
And
see.
can
and
they
it's-
pick anybody, or do we have some say in who they would pick?
I mean, it
Is
has
that-
to be a pre-qualified contractor with KDOT. I mean, just like the other one, depending upon the scope of the project, the people they pick have to be able
And
to
they'd
meet those
still be held to
requirements.
all the rest of the contract provisions at that point?
Yes, they are. Yep. It becomes a difficult situation when you get into that, but it has happened.
We hope not here ever.
That's right. Thank you, Sue. Okay. All right, next slide. Oh, he is on top of it. I like that guy. Post-construction phase. So this slide, we put this in here, and we want to be very clear. This is in no way that we are implicating or singling out any one specific contractor, but this is a slide from our experience, and actually y'all have asked some good questions that tie into it, of what we've seen and what does happen, what can happen. You know, these contractors are operating their business as they see fit. You know, they are running a business flat out. And so there could be a scenario where the contractor will choose to work on other projects. They go out and win their work, they staff it up as they see fit. They know what days they have, and they're making a decision how that is. So if they see something else pressing over here and they need the staff, if they choose to do that, they have that authority, but it doesn't change what their contract is here. You know, we're still charging days and moving on. That's their prerogative as their own business. Another thing, and Councilmember Dean was talking about it, contractors could bid work by including LDs. They can see a project, say, hey, we really want this, but we're going to be 20 days overdue with the other work we got on the books. And so what they can do is they can calculate what the LDs are and stipulate their bid price. Now, keep in mind, KDOT jobs is low bids the winner. So if they're doing that or putting some huge number in there, it's unlikely that they're going to get selected, but it is a possibility that if they have that work, they can approach that way. And then also they could prioritize the projects with higher LDs. So let's just play a scenario that they have two projects that are over on days. One has $5,000 each day and one has $1,000 each day. From a business perspective, they're going to go work on that $5,000 per day project until it's wrapped up, and then they're going to move over to $1,000. And not saying it happens a lot, any stuff like that, not stipulating or singling out anybody. Just from our experience, we have seen this. It doesn't happen often. Not saying we got a bad contracted community, because we do got a really good one. But this is possibilities that could happen on projects that you face.
I'll
However-
kind of add, Dakota, on the contractor could bid work with LDs. Typically, what I have seen is generally it's not necessarily to pick up more work. That's just not enough days to get this job
Protecting
done. And
themselves.
somehow the days were not allotted. Enough days were not. I'm not saying that's the issue with Woodlawn or any specific project. I'm just saying that's a real issue.
Yes.
If the days aren't specified in the documents to bid and they're not enough and they aren't changed, because sometimes the contracting community will reach out and say before the bid, and they'll get the days added.
This is not enough. We need
Hey,
more.
yeah,
Yes.
So that does happen too, just to kind of give the
Yes,
flip
no,
side
thank
to
you.
what you'd said.
Yes. Thank you. But what I really want to stress on this, regardless of these scenarios, it does not change their contract. It does not change how the inspector is charging working days. If those numbers accumulate up to wherever they may be, that inspector is still charging those days per the specifications in the contract. But the contractor does have the authority to operate their business as they see fit. We got to add that in there. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Ty to kind of wrap us up, and then I'll be back up here for the Woodlawn update. Thanks, Ty.
So hopefully you learned something tonight. We probably should have done this 6 months ago or before we even started on our WAMPO project. But these are the things that we learned. Contracts between KDOT and the contractor, they have a certain number of job or days to get the job done. The contractor has full control over his crews. They have to get the job done within those days. They could work no days for a few weeks and then go out and work 12-hour days or 16-hour days to get it done. Again, it's a business decision that they make. as Dakota said, they may plan on taking some of those liquidated damages because that's in their business plan to do that. And then, we have to be cautious as a buyer of roads. We want as many bids as we can. We want good bids and we want good companies. And so we have to make sure that we're working and being reasonable with whoever we want to bid. So, because we learned some things, we may and hopefully we'll get 45th Street in the next couple of years. So we're going to be more involved in the contract. Of course, the first thing you have to decide is, do we want to use WAMPO funds? We could bid this ourselves and have a project with the contractor, and not even deal with WAMPO or KDOT. The issue is, if it's a $10 million project, do we want to pay that, or do we want $5 million in federal funds or $8 million in federal funds? So that's a policy decision that you'll have to make. But if we're going to go through WAMPO, we can be more involved in the KDOT contract. The engineers can help us with that. Make sure we're establishing reasonable working days, set milestones. Consider incentives. You've heard of that, incentives to get the work done earlier, but that can cost money because they're not going to say, well, if you give us 5,000, we'll get done a month earlier. It'll be 100,000 or 300,000. It's going to be, more money to do that, but it's a possibility. So, this is a process. We want to have a good relation with our contractors. They're making their decisions. We joke about, if you want to get a project done, a street redone as quick as you can, close it and don't let any traffic on it. And that you'll get it done the fastest and the cheapest. But when we're doing arterials like 45th or Woodlawn, it's almost impossible to do because you've got streets. In fact, we got cul-de-sacs that have to use those roads. But anyway, so we have to have these type of inconveniences on our citizens. And but the goal is to get a good product, use federal dollars to assist with that. So with that, Dakota's going to talk specifically about Woodlawn, because I know you've got some questions on where they're at on that. So Dakota.
Thank you, Ty. So when we were doing this update, we did kind of, I won't say cut, but shrink down the typical update. We are going to hit the main points as we always do, but we know with this workshop and following up, want to shrink it down a little bit, but we'll get back on the recurring updates that we were on. So first one is the updates. This is the slide we always have on here, and I think it's been a really great tool for this project overall. The city's done a fantastic job of updating their website with either pertinent information of phase changes or closures here or a water line break or something along those means, but also what the project's going to look like when it's done, so people can get a visual of why we're dealing with this challenge that we're dealing with and what's going to look like when it's all over. And then likewise, we still have our public involvement card, the email address, as well as the phone number, which please use that. That's what it's there for. And we've been pretty good about, getting a response back in probably 24, 36 hours to those. So please continue to use both of those. So as far as working days, we are at 58% complete. We have charged a total of 215 working days. The contracted is 333 currently with 40 cleanup days. And so our last time we gave an update was on October 18th. And so since October 18th to today, we've charged 34 working days. So as far as current and upcoming activities, I think there's been a lot of progress here lately to note, especially south of the tracks and at 45th. But the critical path is still phase 2, as we imagine. That's always been the beast on this whole project. So working on the north half of the intersection at 45th and Woodlawn, and also completing the asphalt on the east side of Woodlawn, south of the tracks, and there's still some left to do north of the tracks once we make connections. And likewise, working on the entrances that tie into that. So the other things is Sonic entrances, Dollar General's entrance. And then upcoming will be switching to phase 2E, which we are being told, we had a progress meeting last week on Tuesday, and they told us they're a month out. So weather pending, of course, we talked about that and the holidays. Sometime in January, February, we'll be in phase 2E, which will be huge. And then eventually working the railroad right away, utilities, getting that going as well. So that's all prep there.
So quick question on that. You said phase 2E, is that when we're going to have two-way traffic or what is 2E
That's-
going to give us?
That's what I was about to get to. Yes, 2E is a new phase because it's always been 2C, 2D. 2E was that magical potion we were throwing on this project to keep some productivity going through the wintertime to get to the two-way traffic in all directions sooner than later. Phase 3 is when we have traffic in every direction. So
Okay. 2 does not.
2 does not. 2 is we'll have northbound traffic still from the railroad tracks all the way through, and then westbound traffic only through 45th.
Kind of a side note on railroad right-of-way work.
Mhm.
I know when Wichita was doing the Hillside and 45th Street intersection, the railroad had it shut down for like 6 months trying to get the railroad work done on those 2 railroad crossings there.
Oh, the whole street?
Yeah.
6 months?
They
Yeah.
had the whole intersection pretty much shut down because of those 2 railroad crossings.
Yeah.
I know that we've always said this is not an extensive work to be done on the railroad, but are we going to see any of those kind of hindrances here because of the railroad?
I sure hope not. 6 months? I don't think so. That's something actually we were talking with Pearson here recently, and KDOT and I. We're moving that work around where that's at. But the way they have it laid out right now is per their schedule. We're looking at their latest schedule, about 2.5 months to 3 months worth of work in there. That's what they have slated for that. And we've challenged them on that. Obviously you factoring your weather days. Is that inaccurate? Is there too much fluff in there? Is there not enough fluff in there? Because we don't want that. No one wants that to be any longer than it needs to be. But per their current schedule, the railroad closure will be about 3 months, or 2.5 to 3 months is what it is.
But that's all work done by Pearson's, or are we relying on the railroad themselves to do some of that work?
So most of it's going to be by Pearson. The railroad does have activities that they have to do themselves on the rail. And so they actually have to coordinate with that. And the whole intent was to piggyback the railroad so that we weren't doing this in 2 separate times, of course.
Yeah.
So that's probably what you're looking for. Yes, let's piggyback that to knock out at the same time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So phase 2D is the phase we're still in, and obviously phase 2 overall is the primary phase, but 2D is for a sub phase we're in. And so this is highlighting 45th and Woodlawn intersection here. So we still have westbound traffic only through the intersection and across. And of course, south of the intersection moving north is northbound traffic. And we do have southbound traffic coming down towards the intersection and then able to head west. So make a right turn there. Yesterday, we poured concrete there. And right now, if the soil is going to be dry enough after that rain we got, the plan this week was to pour this quadrant of the intersection, that northeast quadrant, tomorrow morning, about 100 yards. So that's fantastic. We're getting that concrete in there because that just means that can cure faster and that we can try to sneak that out, get that asphalt base in when temperatures allow. Because once we get this concrete done, we got to tie that asphalt out east and west like we did on phase 2C.
What are we looking at with asphalt plant shutdowns that we can get that done in the next month or?
So we had
You know
that
what I'm
conversation about a month ago about their plants they're using specifically. And so they have 2 plants, and they said we'll always have one running. Now they said that depending on what the mix design is, what the volume is at that time, so of course they're serving everything, they got to modify how that plant's producing. And they also said that it takes about a week to get a plant up and running. You got to have quite a bit of volume to pull a plant out of winter shutdown while it's still in it. So that's unlikely. However, the base, if I recall right, it's 30 degrees and rising to get that installed, which we all know we have seen those temps in January before. We usually had that 2-week cold snap, and somewhere in January, February timeframe where it's ice cold, winds blowing, ground's frozen. So there still is opportunity to get basin, to answer your question, to get
Okay,
that
well,
basin.
My concern is they're forecasting 10 degrees for a high Friday, a week from this Friday. So
Yeah,
that
when you made,
sounds like shutdown time to me.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if it's 10 degrees, we're not doing anything. And you don't want anyone doing anything. You put concrete asphalt down, it ain't gonna be worth a snot in the future. But I mean,
But I'm, like I said, my concern is that would shut down the plants and then we wouldn't be able to do anything in January either.
if it's one day or a few days like that, they're not going to shut the plants down. It's more when we get closer to that mid-January where we know it's going to be like 2 weeks of just ice cold, bare cold stuff. That's when they'll shut them down. But if it's like a one-off one day where it's cold, but the next day it's going to be 55 degrees.
Again, that's my question about the temperature, because we're forecasting at least a week of 32s for a high.
See, if it's 32 for a high, we can still put it down as long as the subgrade's not frozen. Now, of
Okay.
course, there's
So maybe you
methods to
can get
prevent
this
that.
done. Maybe I'm being pessimistic.
Hey, I always say expect the worst, expect the worst, hope for the best. I'm in the same boat, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic to counteract that, but that's something we've been really working on. So I was really excited to see the concrete go down, because that cures it out. Because if they weren't doing that, we wouldn't even be talking about this. So at least we have that opportunity to talk about that and get that going.
I was thrilled to see that, and I was hoping they could force the other side today, but unfortunately it was a lake.
It was a lake. Yeah. Drainage is not on our side right now with that intersection. So this is the phase 2E that we've been working on overall to really expedite getting to phase 3. I mean, that was the intent. So we're looking at this one for a couple scenarios. So I'm more or less going to walk through that. Phase 2E was originally isolating basically the west half of the intersection. Per the original plans, that was supposed to be done in phase 3. Look at the traffic flows. There wasn't enough width to be able to maintain traffic in both ways if we waited till phase 3 to do that. The benefit of that portion, it's all concrete. Concrete is more flexible, not actually flexible, temperature-wise, it's more flexible to install in colder temperatures than asphalt is. And so that provides opportunity to get that work completed. While we were looking at that, we have 2 lanes here, and so it doesn't show it too well, but in this gray shaded area, there's actually 2 lanes. It should be a little bit further over. They have the east lane done, except for the asphalt on the north end. They're waiting until we get more asphalt coming and knock out at the same time. But there's that middle lane, and we kind of talked about it. One of these updates, it's been a while back. So if you can imagine the way it's currently laid out is we're going to have northbound traffic going this new easterly lane, southbound traffic on the far west existing lane that's 3 feet up in the air. And then we're going to have workers working in this middle portion. That's not safe. And frankly, I don't think they can do the work just because you got to get your trucks in to remove the stuff. You got to put concrete in. So when we go to this phase 2E, we'll have southbound traffic shut down to the intersection. Of course, the primary detour, the official detour, will be using 53rd to Oliver or vice versa. I probably shouldn't be promoting that there's access around internally. People know the streets around here locally. So the official detour is 53rd. I'll clarify there.
And they will.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll still have northbound traffic. As you can see, we shoved it over to the east side. We're currently figuring out where that's going to happen at, because I'm sure you're all aware, you're heading north towards railroad tracks. You sneak back over to the east side, then you come back over west and go down. So we're either going to move the northbound traffic on the east side, right where that railroad crossing happens, and that way you can just go straight on through. Or the original intent was to put a ramp in kind of south of the Dollar General to come off the west side of Woodlawn down the east side and then carry on north. So we're evaluating that. What's better options? Of course, if you go further south of the ramp, we're going to start messing with some of the entrances on both sides of Woodlawn. So we're evaluating what's best for the traveling public to allow us to get this work done. But northbound traffic will continue on all the way up. You'll have west and eastbound traffic on 45th. However, they will not be able to cross the intersection because obviously we're working on the west half. We're getting that knocked out. And so that was our intent, is pull this out. And we heard what everyone was saying. Focus on that. Get it completed. Get it done. Get out of there. And then once we get this work done, we can go to phase 3 where we have traffic in every direction on all roads.
What is your current ETA to start and finish that phase?
So the starting is what we were telling us. Obviously, weather pending, what they told us in the progress meeting
Right.
last week was a month out. So we're looking at, so 3 weeks from now,
Mid-January.
mid-January. Yeah. So let's see. Start of 2E. Yes, sir. And so this schedule showing me, yeah, mid of January. So that would start. And we were talking to them about what that time frame looks like as far as completing it. Their current schedule is showing first week of March.
First week in March?
Yes, sir.
So you're looking at 6 to 7 weeks?
Yes, sir. That's the current plan. I always say weather pending. I know I got to keep saying it, but that's what their schedule is showing and how they have that laid out for that.
So you said first week of March to finish 2E?
2E is the current plan. Yes, ma'am.
All subject to change depending on weather and other events.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
So then, if it goes planned first week of March, you can drive through that intersection both ways.
Yeah, it shows phase 3, March 9th, March 10th. We'll have to set up traffic control, of course, and get that situated. But yeah, March 9th, March 10th, traffic in every direction.
I'm going to say mid-March.
Thank you for saying that. Yes. I always want to be transparent with everyone, but you know, as long as it's understood, weather plays into it, impacts happen, and it will slide. But
When you said traffic control, you're talking like temporary stop signs and
Yes,
barricades,
sir.
not the lights.
not the lights, no.
Okay.
No, simple stuff that they can get done in a day, maybe
Good.
2 days tops.
I didn't want to be waiting on traffic lights.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
that'll take a lot longer.
Yeah.
Yep. Can I go back one real quick? Does this all make sense? I wanted to pause and just make sure that's getting digested because that is coming up, and of course we'll get with Tristan and make sure stuff gets pushed out the right way so
So,
communication.
so
happens.
to understand that, you're saying basically at that intersection, you cannot go west of that intersection at all while that's closed. Well, that's in
Yeah,
process, right?
there'll be barricades right here,
Right.
and barricades right here.
And
Oh, I'm
and,
sorry. I apologize. sir. We're
Woodlawn
not-
can't turn, the Woodlawn, northbound Woodlawn traffic cannot go westbound on 45th.
Cannot
from
go
there either.
westbound. Yeah, I misspoke. You will not have barricades here because you can still have traffic come here and go north. You can have this northbound traffic come here and go east. However, you will not be going west through the intersection in any fashion because that will be a hole for a little bit, and then we'll get concrete filled up, and it'll cure out for 7 days, and we can put traffic on. We got to put sealant on it, then put traffic on it.
But that does keep 2 driveways open for the businesses on the corners, right?
Yep, here and here, and then Dollar General there, and then the other one down here.
It looked like they ripped out one of the driveways for Dollar General today. Is that?
That's the one they're trying to get knocked out.
Try to pour back.
Been
Yeah.
been
Yep.
that way for a few days, but,
Mhm.
so at this phase, both entrances to Dollar General and both entrances to Los Canados will be open
Yes.
when this phase starts.
Yeah, so that was one we were trying to figure out where to put that ramp at because this entrance right here is obviously still on that existing asphalt that's above.
Yeah.
So if we put this ramp, let's just say down here, we'll have to figure out some kind of accommodation that people can get if they come in through that way and get in here, but they'll have to exit this way.
I
I
would
mean, it'd be
assume
tough. It'd just be better just to shut that entrance off and just make that the primary. But
it'd be easier for you, but I would assume you could do the same thing you did on all the roads south of there is just cut through there and put gravel down to get that entrance open.
yes. Oh, you're talking this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the trick is getting the traffic out and back onto Woodlawn because we're in a tight corridor here because we can't put a ramp in here.
Well, we could
We're
make it
cooking it.
one way in. It's better than no
Yes.
entrance is what
Yeah,
because it's northbound traffic anyway, but
One thing I'd add here is if we're telling them to focus on the intersection, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to remove the whole west half of the road to put in a ramp. This is just adding to the time that it's going to
it's adding
take.
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
Yes.
The other thing I'm a little concerned about is how much traffic will utilize those entrances if you have them both open
They'll
to go
cut through.
west
Yep.
to get through the intersection the wrong way.
yeah,
And so I think actually you'd want to consider strongly not having those open to prevent that from happening.
yeah, I saw the Dollar General right turn the other night. That's where you come west along 45th, go through Dollar General, and go north.
Mhm. Yep.
The long
Well,
way
you will
around.
have-
It
yeah.
was shorter than the other way.
Okay, so you
Because
gotta
you couldn't
have
make
it,
a right turn.
looking
wanted to
at
point that
that
out.
process, I think you gotta have both ramps available to Los Canados. Otherwise, their traffic flow is gonna just
It would
die.
diminish a
It's
lot.
going to kill them.
Yeah.
Because their only access would be eastbound on 45th.
Yeah, you'd have to come
And
through here. to
that'll
get
just
into it.
kill them. I think that's just untenable. We got to find a way to solve that one, I think.
We'll make a note. We'll do our best. And of course, we'll work with Ann on that and see what we can come up with.
Yeah.
All right. So we did get a few questions, and so we just want to have a placeholder in these updates moving forward for those type of questions. When will the intersection at 45th Street go back to four-way? Like I was speaking about earlier, based on the current schedule, contractor expects the intersection to flow in all directions on March 10th, because that'll be that March 9th, 10th of getting it transitioned. And of course, there's the caveat that I can repeat again, but I think you all have heard that enough as far as it's weather dependent. But that'd be the start of phase 3, where not all our headaches are going to go away, but it's definitely going to make it a lot easier having traffic in every direction for everybody.
You've got down 4 weather days, and I probably missed them because I wasn't even in town. Were those around Thanksgiving?
You're talking about the second question here?
Yeah.
We pulled that information from our inspector from his diaries from the last day. I can't recall myself because I've been out as well. Because there's 4 weather days. There's probably a rain day or 2 rain days, but as you can see, we also had the recovery was a part of that 4 days.
Right.
So I can't tell you right now specifically when those days were. Yeah. Yeah, this is what we got straight from the inspector's handbooks. I mean, this information is correct. It's just when that happened, I can't tell you. And then the 2 holidays would be Thanksgiving, Thursday and Friday. Yeah. So closing statements. We want to kind of, as you see, per the working days right now, we're 58% complete. So kind of just take a step back and think about the challenges that have been facing this project and what's been overcome today. It's been quite a few. The first one, I just want to really give a shout out to the city for pulling out the utility relocation project ahead of the KDOT job. Doing that was tough at that time, but I can tell you right now, that was a huge success for this project still able to progress, that we weren't dealing with those issues at the time this one was. So that's a really good move by the city to allocate that work ahead of time to get this project rolling. The other one was the 37th Street water line that the city of Wichita performed there at the northeast corner of 37th and Woodlawn. That really kind of impacted the phasing. So that kind of goes back to the collaboration of the whole entire construction team of, hey, how can we address this? How can we keep this project moving forward? The contractor wasn't able to work the full spectrum that they were planning on, but we were able to find avenues to keep them on site and keep them rolling. And then at least the next one, adjusting phasing to improve productivity. Construction is a variable thing. It's why I'm so passionate about it. Every day is a different day, and every headache you're on challenge is always a different headache. But again, going back to communication, just collaboration, and the city being heavily involved, the Chief Atterbury being involved, everyone playing a part in this, it's been a really productive thing to see. On top of that, the railroad underground permit, at the start of this job, we didn't have that. And usually that would really devastate a project. And to be able to navigate that water, get that permit wrapped up as soon as possible that we could. Obviously, that's always a timely process, but to keep the contractor on site moving along while you have an open permit was a big one. Road closures, of course, the grade differential, that is a huge, huge challenge to overcome. And then at the end of the day, this is an $8 million plus project. This is a really big project. It's a main arterial. There's a lot of utilities that have been here for decades. There's a lot of homes. There's a lot of subdivisions that have one way in, one way out. So to navigate that and keep the project moving forward, it's been really good to look back on. So positive takeaways. It's one thing to feel a project's kind of moving along a little slower than expected. It's another thing when it's going slower than expected and you don't have a high quality product. One thing we can look you all in the eye and say that everything's been installed to date has been top notch. Meet every specifications. We have not had one deficiency on the job. And so to be able to say that and carry this on, as you guys know, what's in place right now is the best that it can be per the specifications on this project. It's going to be a major improvement. It's a gateway to the city. This thing is going to be gorgeous when it's done. And I know I keep saying it, but we're going to get there. It will be a day. We're all going to smile and maybe even cut some ribbons. Who knows? But it's going to be good to see this one completed and see what it looks like when it's all finished and said and done, and everyone having access that they planned on. So with saying that, I will stand for another round of questions on this specifically. And
So I had just two quick questions. I think at our October 18th meeting, if I'm remembering right, they had either just were 2 weeks behind or getting ready to go over 2 weeks behind. Has that happened? And then number two, are we still on track for summer 2023? Totally done.
So your first question is, they gained a lot of ground over the past month, the 6 weeks. I think that's pretty obvious to everyone on how they got to that point. So it's back to where they intended to be. As far as the project completion, going off this last schedule, it's not summer of 23. It's probably more fall is what it's looking like, to be honest with you. I will say that the past couple of progress meetings, we've really been diving in and challenging everyone involved of what can we do to keep this thing, to expand this even quicker, get it going, make up a lot of ground. And I got to admit, the contractor has put a lot of effort into it, and they brought up some really creative ideas that Ann and I were just talking about today, that we need to get that on paper, kind of get that solidified, and then bring it to y'all's attention to see how we want to move forward, because it will impact people in a different way. But it'll be a decision y'all can make of, is it worth going through another challenge, more of a challenge to get it done faster, potentially faster. Of course, it's a working age project, but I can come here and tell you that there's a lot of creativity going on to produce a better, quicker, efficient product.
I want to encourage you to continue the creativity, because one time we said spring, summer, now we're saying summer, fall.
Mhm.
That's like a 6 month
That's a big swing.
delta.
That's
That's
a
not
big
a good
swing.
delta to have. So I'd like to see us get it sometime in the summer.
Yes, sir.
Spring even better, but I realize that's probably
Right.
that's probably not
Right.
cards.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna make that one, but no, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what we're going to try to do, is be creative and tighten this up.
It's kind of selfish, but I wouldn't mind seeing the railroad track to 45th done before south of the railroad track. If that, if we got that open to traffic both ways before we got the rest of it open.
Right. Unfortunately, with phase 3, we need that portion. We need to get that traffic over on that east side so that we can start tearing out that west half once we get to phase 3. So are you talking about like immediate, let's get that knocked
No,
out?
I'm talking about finished.
Yeah. Finished, done.
Go ahead and dig the dirt out and get the asphalt down and have it open both ways before we even get the railroad done, is
I got you. Okay.
just purely selfish, I said.
No, that's fair. Appreciate the comment.
I'll be excited to see the creative options you guys have come up with.
Yep.
Good. I am kind of curious about reconciliation on the schedule. Has anybody with Garver, the inspection team, or has this come up in project meetings, went back and looked at what the contractor's revised proposed schedule is and how many working days that they have included to finish, and how that correlates with what they have left?
Yeah. And that's something KDOT does too, of course. A contractor
Right.
throw a schedule.
And what's that show?
I don't have that information with me. I do know KDOT has evaluated that, and we have as well, as far as what that looks like. I mean, the goal is still to get it done. There are some pending things that are out there right now that
Right.
are still getting evaluated, that would impact that information, I guess I'd call it.
Right. I'd be really
yeah.
curious to know that. Like,
That's something we can follow up with.
Yeah.
And I can distribute that to everyone when we get that information.
that'd be helpful. I think that would help everybody kind of see where it fits with the contract, and they can make a decision on how many kind of days they think maybe seems, and they can kind of get a better comfort level for the overall
Mhm.
contract and schedule.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Zimmerman? All right, well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate the detail. That's
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Was there any more in the whole streets section that we needed to discuss, Ty? Was that, we're done with that? So we're ready to go on to policies on the agenda?
Okay, so, go back. There we go. Councilmember Hamburg brought up a question to me about proclamations, and you've seen those every so often on agendas. And so I thought, well, I'll just kind of give you an update on kind of how those work, and you can kind of discuss your thoughts on that. But currently, we don't. It's not included in your meeting policy. And the process is that either I or the mayor will receive requests for a proclamation. Then we vet the proclamation, the organization, to make sure it's something that we feel the city would support. And then if we agree, then we put it on the agenda. There are important dates that I'll or the mayor will just include, such as Public Works Week, government holidays, Veterans Day, things like that. And we could add language to the policy that determines, what and how proclamations are handled. But that's kind of the way it works now. And so I think I'll let Councilmember Hamburg kind of share her thoughts and concerns and let you discuss that.
Yeah, I appreciate just the opportunity to learn more about it. We've been here a long time already tonight, and you guys have seen your agenda packet. Ty presented kind of what I was thinking pretty well. If I could look into that non-existent crystal ball that we all talk about and say, well, the next 42 years are going to be just as uneventful as the past 42 years, and nothing divisive is ever going to come up in the future, then I would have never brought this up. What I'm really suggesting is to really make a small change that to me has the potential for upside if we ever were faced with an issue that was divisive or controversial, and really no downside. And Mayor did a great job giving examples, even though he didn't know he was doing it. So if you recall, when he remoted in, we did have a proclamation for Veterans Day that was officially in our packet. But then he addressed it in his mayor's report, and so did the council, a few council members. Since we have a lot of latitude in our reports, I thought, anything that's important to us to address, or anybody that mayor wants to bring to the podium to recognize, I'm not looking to, have scouts in our schools not be recognized. But I mean, as we all know, things that we don't think are divisive can be considered divisive. We serve a really diverse population and different religious backgrounds and things like that. So I thought what I'm proposing is just to do away with official proclamations under the banner of the city in our agenda packet, just to make it really clean. And then still having our latitude as individuals. And then if 80% of Bel Aire says, oh my gosh, so-and-so or mayor recognized something that offended us, we say, well, the city's not endorsing this. You can take that up with them at the ballot box if it was that offensive to you. So those were just my thoughts, and that's pretty much the long and short of it.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
One question I had on this, I seem to recall something with, I don't know if it's the Tree City USA or the Playful City designation. I'm thinking that one or more of the kind of awards or designations that we get may have some sort of requirement to have the city officially recognize via proclamation certain things. Am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, that is, you're right. I believe to get the Tree City USA, we have to do a proclamation, and there are a couple of those where that's part of the process, is a proclamation.
Yeah. So in general, I think it's an interesting and probably a good idea. I think we have an increasing amount of proclamations, and I don't know, at what point we have too many proclamations or not enough proclamations. Sometimes it seems like the mayor has to read 5 proclamations, which maybe is a bit much, but that may be just the way it is.
Done that, but
I vaguely remember a time where you had to distribute one to each council member
well, I did have one time I did that
because
That's
there were
true.
so many of them.
There were some.
And so
Okay.
I don't have a lot of passion about this topic, but I did recall that and just wanted to bring it up.
I kind of understand Ms. Hamburg's perspective about being divisive about stuff, but I don't know if we can really successfully dance around that. I think that every council and the council will change. I mean, I don't know when or how, but the members of this council will change, and every council will have a different feel for what they think is an appropriate thing or not an appropriate thing. And if we do bring something up as a proclamation on the agenda, I hope, and you find it objectionable, I hope you tell us that, but I don't. I've never heard anybody really have a concern with the ones we've done. Now, I think, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said you'd seen other cities that put some things out there that their citizens didn't like. And I don't know if we've done that, but
To be clear, we have not done that here. This is really an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure before we sort of head down the path. Just as things out there do get more divisive, and we're nonpartisan here, and I think you mentioned too the term political footballs, and also just trying to really thinking about one of our values is to be inclusive. And Justin touched on this, by definition, like we went from May until Veterans Day without recognizing anything. Well, by definition, unless we're going to have 4 hours of proclamations, we are going to pick and choose what to include and not include. So those were my thoughts.
okay.
Well, I don't see that we can do this short of not having any proclamations, because if we only include Bel Aire groups, they can be divisive as well. So
That would be the one part where I would clarify in your packet. After thinking about it further, that was initially what I had suggested in my email, but really leaving it under the purview of the mayor who runs our meetings anyway, not putting anything in our packet under the Bel Aire banner, because you're right. Anything can be divisive, whether they're here in Bel Aire or not.
well, and they may not even exist yet. It may be something in the future that
Exactly.
gets organized. And then the other question is, do we want to give up designation as Playful City because we don't do proclamations? I don't know is that worth something to Bel Aire's image?
That is a consideration that's new to me tonight. Yeah.
Tree City USA, Playful City USA, sometimes you can get grants through that because you're affiliated with them. But I don't know that we've ever gotten any grants from either one of them. But that's an opportunity there. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Is being a Tree City USA important to us or not?
Well, I do think that, and I still got work to do on it, and I will get there, on the economic development. Those are important things to be able to advertise about your city, because people look at that stuff. They want to know about quality of life, and they want to know, what is that like? What have you done to help that? I was talking with one business in town about economic development, and they said, you really need to make sure you take care of the beauty of the city, the trees and landscaping, and make sure that that's there. And I think we're doing a pretty good job with that. But I want to continue that. I don't want to slack away from that and let that deteriorate at all. I know we had to take some trees out along Woodlawn. I also know that those trees are going to be replaced, but they had to come out because the construction just couldn't happen with those trees there. So that will happen, and we need to continue those kinds of things.
I certainly don't want to stop doing any things we do as a Tree City. I'm just not sure we need the plaque is kind of where I'm at. I like all the things we do with planting trees. I'd like to see more trees planted around. I love that. But
Maybe a question for our city attorney. I think the way that the proclamations always read is that it's the mayor proclaiming. Is there something about our code or the way that our city government is structured that makes that a power of the mayor to proclaim things like that? And does adjusting a policy like this really change the role of the mayor in that circumstance?
I do think you bring up a good point. Proclamations overall in local government are kind of within the mayor's office, within the mayor's scope of authority. Some cities do have where proclamations are then affirmed by, everyone on the council or not. We don't go into that detail at all in our codes. We just kind of accept the general interpretation of proclamations. So if you wanted to maybe refine or revise and the way you handle proclamations, one way to do that might be to specifically say they're, strictly, the mayor's discretion to determine what proclamations, then it's on the mayor.
Is that how it
Explicitly.
is today? If the mayor doesn't want to proclaim something, he doesn't proclaim it?
Well, the agendas are put together by the mayor and the city manager.
To
That's how I,
was
that's how I
about-
interpret it
to
working
some
today.
degree, but that's never really happened. Okay, I've never had one presented. I mean, we've had some that some organizations have come and said, we'd like you to do a proclamation on this, that we said, no, we're not touching that.
Right.
Okay, but I don't think we've ever had somebody propose a proclamation of this from this bench or city staff that we said, no, we're not doing that.
Because I think it would be reasonable to just really clarify that that's one of the powers of the mayor, and it's at the mayor's discretion what he's going to proclaim or not proclaim. And if anyone has issues with his decisions there, they can deal with that at election season.
I was just about to say that. I appreciate Ms. Sandberg bringing up this issue, but to me, it feels like if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And maybe what that means is just further clarifying whether or not the mayor needs to, if it's his authority, just continue to do it on his behalf for his decisions, or is there, if we're getting the agenda packets ahead of the meeting, then we have the ability to decide do we have an issue with that and voice the concerns with the mayor or the city? I don't know if that's the right option. I think I would prefer the first one, which is how I believe we've operated for as long as I know, that the mayor is making the choice to proclaim.
It
But
says that in the proclamation. I, the
Yep.
mayor of Bel Air,
Right.
proclaim this. So it's definitely him doing it.
Yep.
If that impacts your thinking on whether or not we should continue.
It sounds like we're headed towards a consensus of leave it alone. But the last thing I would say is, that was another thought I had, is in the background where people are coming to us and we are just making a decision with our staff, making that decision, saying no. At some point, is somebody going to say, well, you recognize this, but not that, under the banner of the city that is a public, a municipality that represents 8,500 people, even if they don't call us up and look at our agenda packet. So those are just my thoughts on it. Thank you.
No, I do think if it's currently unclear anywhere in our code or policies that it's a power of the mayor to do that, we should clarify it. Just be crystal clear.
I would feel comfortable with, and that would get to the heart of it, is to really say, because we don't address it at all and just say, hey, this is him talking, not all of us, not him for all of us, even if it says that technically in the proclamation.
Yeah, well, I mean, the people elect the mayor, and they
Sure.
elect the mayor to speak on behalf of the city, and so he's proclaiming on behalf of the city, and that makes sense to me.
Any other input? Whoops. Okay. I think the next issue is the capital projects, and Ty's playing Santa Claus today, right?
Okay, so yes. So what I want to talk about
Got it down
is
to this.
strategic planning. So that's something that it's not easy to do, because we're looking years down the road. You may commit possibly millions of dollars to projects that's going to happen over the next several years. But it's important because staff needs it. It directs us, our workflow, our funds, so where we're putting funds and budgeting funds. Citizens and businesses want it. Shows a vision for the community, what will be happening over the next several years. So what is a strategic plan? Really, a strategic plan helps realize our long-term vision by setting goals and objectives in a systematic and incremental way. It serves as a community's roadmap to use to prioritize initiatives, resources, goals, and department operations and projects. So it's a big picture planning document. So what our vision of the strategic plan is, it's really a multi-year plan, and we'd like to kind of divide it out. Right now, we work on during the budget season, capital expenses. So you see there's got trucks in there and things like that. And it's in the budget document, but that's all we have. So we want to increase that to have the street maintenance, which PEC did for us. And so it's a multi-year, says how much they're estimating each year. Facilities, we've talked about during this budget season, improvements here, public works, et cetera, et cetera. Parks and recreation, what are we doing about new parks? Are we going to build some new parks? We're going to expand some parks. What are we doing at the rec center? We're working on the plan for that. And then, of course, arterial street improvements. And so it's a living document. So as we're working on the budget, we review that and it's updated annually. What did we get done? Do we need to reprioritize something? We'll include it in the budget manual that we produce. And then it gives staff a goal for financing and deliverables to measure for you all. So what your challenges are is you all sent me a list of issues that you think we need to consider. And there was a lot of them. And so what Ted and I did was some of them were the same. So in front of you, we just gave you that list. And so what we would like for you to do is prioritize those. So take that list and rank what you think are the most important, number one, number two, et cetera. You can do it tonight. You can take it with you and drop it back off. Think about in that list, what your priorities, what the citizens and businesses want, not just because you heard someone complain about a certain issue that's now a priority. It's what the citizens as a whole want. And then what Ted and I are going to do is, and we're going to take those and we're going to bring back in January options of how you can get some of that stuff done, how it can be financed or paid for, when we think we can get it done. And what this will do is creates a vision and the goals for us and the citizens. Keep in mind that, because there was a comment about lowering taxes and water rates, that if that's the priority or the goal, we can't do the capital projects because you're taking away the funds to do those. And again, like I mentioned before at my last presentation, you subtract out the debt service of our budget, we actually operate the city on 31 mills. That's what we run the city on because we can't use that debt money. It's gone. So we are very efficient. The thing that's really helped us is that growth and some of the refinancing that we now have money to spend on capital projects. And we need to be thinking about that. Again, like I talked about earlier on WAMPO, we've never had this because we never had the funds to do anything. I remember when I got here, we had $200,000 in reserves in the general fund, and the water and sewer funds each had about 100,000 in them. And we were just barely staying alive. And if some kind of major catastrophe hit, we would be borrowing money to survive. So everything's different now, and we have the ability to start making some long-term plans. But we need your input. What are those?
Well, Ty, I appreciate you putting this together. I do have a question, though. The fourth item down, I think, is probably misstated. It says Woodlawn from 53rd to K254, and that's all Keachai. So what was intended to be there?
45th.
45th?
Yeah,
From 45th
Woodlawn.
to 53rd.
Or 53rd. No, 45th
To 53rd.
to 53rd.
Okay,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
That makes more sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
45th to 53rd.
45th to 53rd. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I think this is a little more I can digest in
Sure.
just a few minutes.
Yeah.
I want to take this home and maybe have it next Tuesday for you.
Yep.
If that would work.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you could bring it to the council meeting next Tuesday, that'd be great. Because, we've talked about, we've got $1 million of ARPA funds. We've got 5 million sitting in the bank, or the land bank does, that can be used for debt. You know, are we going to use that? Are we going to leverage it? And we'll put together some scenarios of if you do this, you'll have money to do these things. If you do this, you'll have money to do these 3 times that or whatever. We're going to give you some ideas and options for all that money. But we need your vision. What are the priorities? What do you want us to concentrate on?
Okay.
On the street preservation program, are we budgeted out for about the same amount the whole 5 years, or is it taper off?
It's funny how, sorry, we started that project in 2020 or so, and 700,000 was what I thought we could probably do each year. That's 2 years of land sales. You know how things really change pretty quick in Bel Aire. And just to highlight Ty's point, when I got here 6 years ago, we would fund operations, pay specials, pay land debt, and then whatever else, try to do what we can on a street program. The nice thing, and the reason I and Ty really tried to put this in front of you in December and January is because when we start in May, it's kind of too late. Like we're already deep down into the annual budget. So it's always good. I have sometimes I feel like we're painting a little too close to the canvas. So this kind of requires us to step back and say, hey, there's a lot of long-term things we got going on. The other thing that I'm seeing is we're doing a lot of building permits this year. Who knows what's going to do next year? We're going to see over the next 10 years, lots of ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys. We got to make sure we know what we're either saving up for or be able to set some, and we have a lot of different project managers on the council. You need some flagpoles that you can set in the next 10 years. And that's kind of my design to try to present and work with Ty to present, hey, what's the next 10 years going to look like? What if this happens? A lot of times our forecasts aren't right, but we need to start doing that as a city instead of, oh, whatever's left, we're going to throw into streets. So this is our first opportunity to sit in front of you and really step back and look, boy, we got a lot to tackle in the next 10 years. And if we can even do it, that would be amazing. But just this one pager alone, I mean, heck, it's not 9 o'clock and we're just now, just talk about time constraints and money constraints, but it's important to set these types of goals and to have something to strive for. And what we need is the priorities of the council so we can set them in.
So clarify for me, we did the GIS project and we have some idea from that about what our street maintenance or improvement program would be looks like for the next several years. I don't remember if that went 5 years. I thought it went out 10 years, but maybe 5 years is a better time horizon because 10 years is like, you don't have any idea what's going to be in 10 years, right? So have you pulled those numbers from that GIS project to set your budget planning for the next 5 years?
It's the beautiful thing about a long-term plan is I know exactly how much to put in each, and it's in our capital improvement plan right now to be spent. I've matched it with what we usually do as far as transfers from our general to our capital improvement plan. And that's what, we talked a little bit about our Parks and Rec evaluation / study that we just passed last council meeting. I would really like, once we get that, we can start planning out those types of activities. So what you're looking at, not only this plan, but plans inside of this plan that are addressing the issues. And that's kind of how normal cities try to operate. But Bel Aire is, as you know, we tend to, we were set a little behind the ball, and now we're digging ourselves out of it. And this is our first effort to make these adjustments.
So the question in my mind is that have we added all the streets back into the GIS that were left out of it? And do we have a good feel for that's current with current inflation, or do we need to refresh it for the inflation factors?
Well, I mean, Ann probably speaks better on this. I'm just going off memory of the report from PEC.
Well, she's coming up. I was thinking that we spent a lot up front on this and then we weren't going to spend as much in future years.
Yes. The PEC report did have a plan laid out for 5 years, and then it kind of repeated for the second 5 years. So it plans to touch pretty much every street in town within that 5-year period. They did leave out some of the arterial streets because those are eligible for WAMPO funding. And it was kind of a question on, do we want to pursue WAMPO funding on some of these streets? Do we want to just simply put microsurfacing treatment, a new surfacing treatment on them? Those were some of the items that were left off, but that is something that can be addressed if council desires.
Well, I think I want to give folks and council a chance to think about that, but my big fear about those streets that's been left off is we'll forget to get them on there, and then we'll never maintain them. And one day we'll have another failure, and we'll say, "Well, how'd that happen?" Right? And I don't want that to happen. I want to keep the focus on us, and I think the GIS will help us keep it focused. If it's eligible for WAMPO funding, great, but until we have that solid, and even 45th isn't really solid, it's in the tip, but it's an unfunded tip. I think it just behooves us to have that
Sure.
in front of us.
Yeah, at the level we're talking right now, we shouldn't even be thinking about WAMPO. I think to prioritize what we want to do, then once we
Right.
decide that, if our priority is 53rd between Oliver and Woodlawn, then we have to figure out how to finance it, and then WAMPO comes into the question.
Well, yeah, that's kind of right. I agree with that, but I do know that when the GIS was done, they did leave some arterials off, and I'd like those added back in there and put some sort of a number to it so that we're tracking it anyway. At
Sure.
least don't forget about it. Okay.
Right.
Because I don't even know what streets were left off. I know some were left off. I know Woodlawn was left off, but that's going to be a brand new street. But even still, it still needs maintenance, right?
Correct.
Once it's done, right? So we don't want to ignore it. We just don't need to do anything for a few years.
Sure.
Right.
I will work with PEC to get those put back on, or at least in a table somewhere, so we can track that moving forward.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. And does it need to be updated for inflation?
I think
Well, I
when
think they'll
PEC
look-
was here, we asked them to go back and revise their estimates because they came and talked to us about how much this went over what they expected it would because of reasons. And they said they were going to go back and do those updates. I think the question is, have they done those for us or not?
And I think that the updates have been made to the current and reasonably future. It's when you start projecting out the 5+ years that
Not beneficial.
Ted can't predict the future. It's nobody has crystal balls. So that's something, like Ty was mentioning, this is something that we want to update every year. And that's something that we also want to look at. If inflation changes significantly from what was initially programmed, then we do want to go ahead and update those, at least on a percent basis, maybe not take a deep dive into the specific line items to come up with the cost estimates.
And that line was more, and a few of you had in your original posting was, just do more localized streets. And right now we have a plan to do kind of a set number. This year we had more money than we thought we were planning, so we did more as well as last year or 2023. I believe it was 780,000, but it went up to 908 with the latest estimates. And I think we're doing actually a little more than we originally were planning to. So I can see that continuing, but a vote for that would be to massively, throw all our weight behind that program and try to accelerate that, maybe cut down a 5-year into a 3-year, that kind of thing. So that's what I read in between the tea leaves when I was reading everybody's.
No, I appreciate that clarification because when I read that one, I was thinking it was increase it to the needed level.
No.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking too.
Okay,
I-
so
The adjective I had before there was boost funding. So maybe boost would have been better, but
so the plan, the way it is now, in theory, is laid out to maintain this budget with the GIS information we have. And you're asking, do we want to accelerate it?
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. Because a lot of the people had do more streets. Well, we kind of have a set. We're going to touch every street. It just might have to wait 5 years to touch every street.
All right. Okay. So let me ask Ty a question. How did you want us to grade this? I mean, there's like, I didn't count them all here, but there's looks like there's about 30 items here. Do you want us to grade them 1 through 30?
That might be difficult, but that would probably be the best because we're going to have to, we've got 6 of you and we're going to have to go through all 6 and figure out, okay, where's everybody falling? Because you may only rate the top 5 and Justin's are totally different 5 than your 5.
Yep, I'm sure they will be.
So having a number to every one of them would probably
He's
be
the
the
west side, I'm the
easiest.
east side,
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A question I had was, one, I know when we talked about the public works facility and the police garage, there was also discussion about a community center, storm shelter kind of facility. That's not on this list. I don't know if you're anticipating that being on the list or if that would go in with city hall upgrades or if I'm missing something. And then the second thing would be a suggestion that should we categorize them by roads, public works, community improvement, quality of life kind of category, and then rate each rate within each category, and then have a bigger discussion about what priority those 3 categories might go in. I'm just making a suggestion because I do agree it's going to be really difficult to rate 30 projects.
I think the challenge is that our road funding is going to compete with the not road priorities.
Always.
And
That
so,
won't ever.
so
be
we are going to have
different.
to decide what things are we going to prioritize over roads, or are we going to prioritize nothing over roads?
See, I think
I
if you
agree.
do this analysis.
It'll always be that way, though. I think. So I think you're going to always have to want to do more than just road. You're going to have to do multiple things.
Right,
The
that's
question
issue.
is, what roads the priority? What public works things the priority? What?
Right.
Because there's always going to be priorities in every category.
I agree. Without price tags on them, I can maybe get 5 of these versus 1 of these
Right.
roads.
Yeah, you can kind of guess in your mind what that might be, but anyway, just for sake of.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I just think that if we do that, we'd have to have the list has to be redone. And so we know what's in what category. And I think for simplicity's sake, it might be better just to run with this. And you will get some of these other
Sure.
projects that are not roads will become higher priority.
They will.
Simply because
Yep.
some of them will say, oh, that really needs to be done.
Right.
And if we don't, then we're all really focused on roads and nothing else.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And
I think it'll
remember-
wash out for us. I'm hopeful anyway.
And you remember my first slide said this is not easy.
Oh no.
This is tough,
Yeah.
but this really has to be done. This is what Ted and I need. If we're going to move Bel Aire forward and we're going to do the things that you and the citizens want, we need direction so that we can help you get there. Because, and again, I know Councilmember David, mentioned money, and that's true. But what we don't, if we put that this is going to cost 10 million, this is 5 million. We don't want you to say, well, let's do 2 of the 5 million ones because then we get more done. Well, but is that what you want done? Or do you want the $10 million project done? And if you want the $10 million project done, we'll figure out how to get it done for you. So that's why I said, don't think about the money. We'll bring that back to you. Now you may rate it and we come back and say, okay, this is the main road, it's $10 million and this is how we can fund it for you. And you may say, well, what was number 2 and number 3? And we say, well, it was these, and you could get them done for this way. And you may say, okay, well, let's reprioritize before we move this thing forward. Let's rethink this because we may not want to, even though everybody thought that the number 1 priority was, rebuilding the public works building for 10 million. You may say, wait a minute, if we can get 3 roads done for 10, and those were 2, 3, and 4, let's reevaluate. Let's do that. So that's why we're going to give you several options to help narrow down the direction you want to go.
Okay.
I want to ask about, I just noticed this one down here, upgrade HVAC. It's already planned for 2023. Does that even need to be on the list? Do we not have funding for it?
It's in a non-budgeted account, so it's going to come before you through a report. You can vote it yes or no. You can
Okay.
cross it off. I just felt
So we
to
probably
be more
should think
transparent.
about.
It's money on the table that hasn't been
It hasn't been
seriously
committed, so we
allocated.
should rank it.
Yeah, and I think we do that because we don't want the budget discussion. We don't want to have to debate every purchasing decision during our budget discussions. So maybe some of us want that, some of us don't. We leave it in the budget, know that we'll make that decision when it comes time to spend the money.
I appreciate you putting them in here though, because these are some investments that are significant. They're not insignificant. But on the community building, did you want us to add that, or is that kind of off your guys' capital list? Like you guys didn't answer that first question.
We left 2 blanks.
Oh,
You can
all right.
you can fill in
That's the direction.
whatever you
Okay.
might need.
I already put it on the first blank because I thought that was a good idea to think about.
All right.
All right.
I've got my answer.
There you go.
Thanks, Ted.
All right. Any more questions about this capital projects consideration?
And just to review, that ARPA money does have to be spent by 2024. Is that right, Ted?
Correct. It will be. So there's the final Treasury guidance came out earlier this year, and a lot of it can be used on what they call governmental services. We spend a lot on governmental services, so that allows me to help us spend that in the time allotted. Also, they removed or they allowed a exemption for the single audit requirement. It's one-time exemption or affidavit that I have to sign. So there's a few little steps I gotta jump through, but all in all, we'll have it spent. We'll be able that money will be available in our capital improvement plan.
Okay, any other questions?
Oh, the splash pad. It says replacing the pool with the splash pad. Are we not open to keeping both, having both? I'm just, well, I don't know. I don't want to.
That was a discussion that was had about replacing the pool. So that could be your very last priority, or you could add that we want to repair the pool and not do anything about splash pad.
Yeah. Did you guys get with the splash pad people? Have you got anywhere towards you can give us a report on that sometime in the future?
So we've met with some splash pad people. They've came and looked at it and said that they can do it. Of course, everybody asks how much you got, how much you want to spend, what'd you budget for? And so, what I was seeing as decent was around 300,000. And they all said, yeah, we can, convert it to a splash pad for that. Now, again, that's going to fluctuate. If you say we only want one squirty thing, it could be 100,000. Or you say we want the slides and all of these things, and it could be 500,000. So, but yes, we've made contact with folks, and they'll design it for us. They're just going to want to budget.
So there's not like a pre-designed plan that we would go with. It's totally.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't want to head too far down the splash pad rabbit hole right now, but just that's assuming that we use whatever we can from the pool infrastructure now and shift it over to the splash pad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we met with 2 or 3 of them, and they all said that that's a great location. That's a perfect place to change it, because the pool house is already there that can be used for restrooms. The fence is there, so if you could fence it off. I mean, they said that would be a very easy and nice transition.
Okay. But yeah. If we did that, though, we would no longer have a pool if we did it that
Exactly.
way.
We wouldn't have a pool.
Yep.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions or discussion, I think we are adjourned for the evening. We'll see everybody next Tuesday. a good week.